Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This video is brought to you by First Detachment Nutrition. Battle tested, expert formulated. Use discount code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. All right, folks, I've got a great one for you today. This is an interview I did with contest prep coach AJ Sims. AJ is one of the coaches that I look up to. Nobody gets people as peeled and as full as AJ does. He's one of the best out there. And I have nagged AJ for a while to come on. I probably was tired of me DMing all the time, but AJ finally gave up and came on, and we had a good talk about his strategy for getting people absolutely peeled. I didn't have enough time to cover everything I wanted to cover, so hopefully we can get a part 2 up. If you enjoy this, leave a comment in the comment section. We'll talk about getting AJ on again. I hope you enjoy this one. It's a really good interview, and we'll get into it in just 1 second. All right, folks, Big Paul here today with the man himself, AJ Sims. AJ, you were the most demanded interview that I've ever had. Everybody was telling me you need to get this guy on. You're known for getting people absolutely peeled. I don't think I've seen anybody, really, I don't know that there's any other coach that consistently gets people peeled like you do, man. It's impressive, but I wanted to get you on and talk about that. And anyway, thank you for coming on, man. How's it going?
It's going great, man. I'm humbled by that. The fact that anybody actually wants to hear what I have to say.
A lot of people want to know. There's all sorts of speculation. I get all the time. People are like, what's this super secret formula? Is there some secret cycle? And
it has to be, right? It's got to be.
Yeah.
It's got to be something secret that nobody knows, right? It can't just be consistent hard work over a period of time and controlling variables. Yeah, no, I mean, it's going great, brother. I mean, I'm actually slowly getting out of the really high level IFBB coaching. I feel like I have nothing to prove on that level anymore. Not that I don't enjoy from a physiological or psychological standpoint of helping high level athletes. It's just at this point in time in my life, because as you know, as a coach, it takes a lot of time to work with athletes.
Yeah.
And then in of itself. And then when you get to a higher caliber, Arnold Classics, Olympias, New York Pros, it's very time consuming, where I'm kind of shifting my focus more towards longevity lifestyle clients, a lot of WWE wrestlers. I'm still working with amateurs, but as far as like high level, I mean, we can get into all the stories, all the preps I've done. I guess that's why I'm here, to kind of take you guys through the history and kind of my methodology. And I think some people will enjoy hearing it, but maybe some people are gonna be a little disappointed, because they're looking for that magic bullet that doesn't really exist, right? As far as contest prep goes.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, at the end of the day, it is just hard work. This is definitely a lesson I've learned the hard way. Is contest prep is sort of made in the off season, man. If you fuck off in the off season and you come in like a fat pile of crap, prep's going to be hard. Going to be really hard.
I've always said that shows are won and lost in the off season. I call it progression season, because I always feel like you're trying to progress. I think shows are won and lost during that time. Obviously, being in somewhat of a deficit during a contest prep, the law of thermodynamics, as you like to say, calories in, calories out. We know that you have to be expending more energy than you're taking in, whether that be, during training cardio, just your basal metabolic rate, resting metabolic rate, your total daily energy expenditure, has to be higher than what you're taking in to a specific amount. So at the end of the day, you have to do this year round, whether it be you're in a surplus and you're eating consistently and constantly. And I always use Jay Cutler as the example, because I grew up in Las Vegas. I trained with him during his, chasing Ronnie. And then when he beat Ronnie, I was training with him. So I saw this guy who is an absolute workhorse. He's a machine through and through. Never missed meals, whether he was traveling every weekend, guest posing. He would fly home, land in Vegas at 11 p.m. and shoot me an email. This was before, texts were really popular. And, he was going to the gym to do cardio or train. That's just his mindset. So when you have a champion's mindset, such as yourself, this is something that you do year round. We were just speaking about this off camera, that you take it serious year round, which is why you've made the progression you've made over the course of 2-3 years, which has been phenomenal. It's one of those things you got to put the work in year around.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time, you got to treat the off season like a contest prep, or you still weigh and measure your food, still, attention to detail. And Jay is a fascinating guy, man. He really, I mean, he's sort of my, I would say, if I wanted to model myself or tell a young man to model themselves out of anybody in bodybuilding, I mean, he exemplifies, I think, what a champion is in everything he does. I mean, you see his success in business. He seems to be a kind, decent human being too. I was at his show. I competed in his show, and he took the time to speak to everybody, man. I mean, he taught, made you feel like you were the most important person there. It was impressive. He's an impressive human being.
Absolutely. I mean, real quick, I mean, when I moved out to Vegas at 16 to pursue bodybuilding, my mom was crazy enough to move me out there with the aspiration of being a bodybuilder from Florida to Las Vegas. And, Jay was taking the time, me at 16, this is when it was 2004. He would come by my house every week and drop off tons of Muscle Tech supplements and clothes that, of course, they didn't fit me. They were 5XL. I still wore them, but he would sit down in the living room and talk to me for 2 or 3 hours. I mean, this is a guy that was literally top 2 in the world at that time. And I'm just a 16-year-old kid, and he would spend the time just mentoring me, teaching me about business, like you said, the business of bodybuilding, but also, training correctly, how to stimulate the muscle properly, that it's not just about throwing around weights constantly. He would always tell me, like, the guys in the Mitsuru Okabe, the Battle for the Olympia videos, a lot of these guys, or even if they shot their own videos, they were showing off by lifting a lot more weights than they normally do. And he would tell me, is like in 2001, when I'll never forget this, which is why I'm mentioning, it said 2001, when he should have beaten Ronnie, most people's opinion, he never did dumbbell presses over 100 pounds for chest. So it just goes to show you, once you have a specific amount of muscle, this is a little tangent, but you have a specific amount of muscle, it's all about proper stimulus. And, that just went a long way at 16 years old, having this guy take me under his wing. So what you're saying about Jay is absolutely true. Through and through, that's who he is. And he's always been like that.
Yeah, I remember when we were backstage at the show and him talking about lifting, and he brought up the fact that he never pressed more than 100-pound dumbbells. Somebody was talking about lifting heavy, and he goes, "What is heavy? It's what does that mean?"
Yeah,
he just that's what he said. And then I use 100 pounds. I don't lift that heavy. I did when I was younger, and I've made more progress. And at the end of the day, I mean, like, we know from all the modern studies and whatnot, a lot of it has validated this mindset. At the end of the day, it is mechanical tension that causes hypertrophy, and your muscles don't know what weight is at the end of the bar. They know, they experience mechanical tension, and you can manipulate that with form and leverage and all. I mean, just look at a power lifter. Power lifters get very efficient with leverage. So they actually experience, it's the opposite of like what a bodybuilder would want to do. You'd want to place more tension on the muscle, whereas a power lifter is actually trying to reduce that tension and increase leverage so they can move more weight. So it's a completely different mindset. Sorry for the side rant there.
But. No, that's great stuff right there, man. And hopefully the listeners can take that and utilize that in the gym. I mean, it is about the proper stimulus, like you said. I mean, your body, your muscles have no idea what's on the bar, the dumbbell, the machine. They only know stimulus. It's kind of like looking at a chicken breast on the digital weight scale. I mean, you can either take in the 10 ounces that's on the scale, or take in the 6 ounces that you're supposed to be eating that's on your program. Your body's going to utilize and digest. And obviously, whether you're in a surplus or you're in a deficit, what you're supposed to be taking in. Now, if you eat too much, obviously, you could be in a caloric surplus, going to throw you off your fat loss. Or if you eat too little, you could lose some muscle tissue. Kind of the same thing goes in the gym in the sense of lifting too heavy on a consistent basis with sloppy mechanics and techniques is going to lead to more systemic inflammation, and not in a good way, more joints, ligaments, tendons. You're going to get injured. You're going to feel horrible. And what I've learned over the years, because I did the same thing when I was young, even though Jay taught me that, I still went in and ego trained and did way too much weight. And at 35 years old now, I have lower back, hip issues, knee issues, just from being stupid and not training properly, where I know that you can make more progress in the gym just by training smart mechanically, getting a proper stimulus, whether that be slower on your eccentrics and full contractions and full stretching and range of motion, time under tension, without going, and trying to reinvent the wheel, because that's what a lot of fitness influencers try to do, is reinvent the wheel of training. When again, there's no magical bullet out there. It's stimulus, just like you say, the law of thermodynamics. It's calories in, calories out. In the gym, it's about proper stimulation, then recovery, feed the muscle, and then do it again consistently over time.
Yeah, it's funny how we all have to go through that phase. I went through it's the young dumb bodybuilder phase. I talk about it, where you got to heave heavy weights around. You probably do crazy shit with the PEDs that you probably shouldn't do. I mean, we all go through that. We the eating way too much food because you think that's going to make you bigger.
Yep.
I remember my post-workout meals being 4 double cheeseburgers from McDonald's and a milkshake, thinking that was going to get me bigger, and I'll just make myself fat. Stupid crap like that. But the ego lifting thing, yeah, it was the same thing, man. It always catches up with you at some point, and then you start getting injuries. That's what happened to me. And I think it's something that people forget about with this stuff. And man, this is a long game. I don't know what the averages are, but I would speculate that somebody from day one in the gym to turning pro bodybuilder, that you probably have to have a good 10 years of sustained training, eating, and whatever else under your belt to make it happen, to have a mature physique. And if you're getting beat up, if you're sick, if you're hurt, you're not going to make it.
Not at all. I think that that's really what comes down to being a successful competitor. Obviously, genetics are going to play one of the biggest roles as far as getting into the higher level. Your shape, your structure, your muscle insertions, but also how you react to any performance enhancers. Are you one of those people that gets extreme side effects? Are you one of those people that literally can utilize a specific amount and basically the kitchen sink, so to speak, and get almost no side effects, right? That is honestly what dictates you becoming a good pro, along with, obviously, along with a consistent work ethic, discipline, dedication for many, many, many years. But yes, you have to have longevity. Health is going to be number one. All your internal markers, everything that you're doing is working synergistically together. So one without the other, it will fall apart. And this is a long game. I mean, I started training, I'm 35 now, but I started training in 2001. And, I've seen so many people come and go over that period of time. And I saw, certain people like, let's say Nick Trigili. I competed with Nick Trigili at Team Nationals when we were teenagers, and he didn't turn pro until maybe 8 or 9 years later. So he had already, just like you said, 10, 12 years of good training under your belt. Kukalo, came up with Steve Kukalo, Team Nationals as well. Jason Huh. I mean, all these people, it took a very long time. And these are guys with great genetics too.
Yeah.
It's not something that happens overnight. This is a long game. And if you don't have all your ducks in a row, where you're methodically processing everything you're doing, and you just think that you're going to take a bunch of PEDs, train in the gym, and 2 to 3 years later, you're going to be on the Olympia stage, more than likely you're just living in another world, because it's not going to happen. So, that's 100%. Long game is the best way to put it.
Yeah. I mean, you can look at it, and there's only so much tissue you can synthesize in a year, even with PEDs in play. I mean, probably one of the biggest growth transformations I've seen is Nick Walker. I mean, you can look, you can see it. I mean, he added 100 pounds from the day he started to now. And, that was a 10-year time frame that it took for him to do that.
And what do we know about Nick? I mean, the fact that he is, yes, he is one of the top genetic guys in the world, but the kid works extremely hard. I know that for a fact. There's only a few guys right now from what I know, that are true workhorses, like we would think a la Jay Cutler, right? Where these guys, they don't miss, right? Nick would fall into that category. And that's the little bit that I know about him, and just seeing him throughout the years, that he has a different mindset, and he's driven, and he has laser focus. He has that killer instinct that only a few guys have. And that's what it takes at the end of the day. So, long story that we're getting into is it takes a long time, guys. So if you're not in it for the long game, you may want to go do something else, because it takes a long time.
Or what do they say? Success is where hard work meets potential.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's right.
I think that's the saying. I'm probably slaughtering that. So let's talk.
You'll get the point.
You get the point, though. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to discount genetics. Genetics play a role in it too. But everybody can improve. Everybody can get better, and I think that's the one thing that I do love about bodybuilding is it is a metaphor for all things in life. If you can learn how to master that discipline, learn how to master that control, you can take that and apply it to everything else you do: business, life, family. Being consistent, being stable, being reliable. All these things are going to result in success in all other areas of your life if you can master that mindset.
Man, Paul, that's phenomenal. That is a huge takeaway right there. I mean, it definitely did that for me. I mean, I started bodybuilding at 13 years old, and it taught me nothing but work ethic. I mean, that is why I'm so disciplined to this day, because that's exactly what I did when I stopped competing. I applied it in every aspect of my life. Was the fact that I was willing to go through, getting to extremely low body fat levels and being disciplined all year, never missing meals, never missing training, no matter how I felt. You apply it to every aspect, and you check those boxes off every single day. So that's great stuff, man.
Well, you may not know it, but you inspired me. I remember I saw one of your, I think it was a reel pop up, and it was late at night, and I'm sitting here and I've got like a bunch of check-ins I still need to do. And I'm like, I don't feel like doing them. Yeah. I think you had something up where you said, do one more check-in.
There it is, man. That's right.
Do one more. And I'm like, damn, this is timely. I just want to go to bed.
I love it, man. It spoke to you. That's great.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know you have that type of mindset, but that's really like when I like mentoring young men and working with young men. And I think that's probably the biggest point that I try to get across to the guys that I work with is that work ethic, mastering that work ethic, mastering being able to push through pain, being able to push through making yourself uncomfortable. Really, I mean, success comes from, I know it's cliche, but being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Oh man, it's true. It's absolutely true. And we live in a microwave era right now. Everybody wants everything right now. And that's not the way it works. You got to go through the hardships. I mean, I have guys come up to me, I want to learn how to be a coach like you, at your age, or be successful. I'm like, listen, you better be ready to work 24/7, because this didn't happen overnight. I put my first Olympia competitor on stage a decade ago, in the 212 class. So, I mean, it's been a long time coming. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of dedication, and it's putting so much effort, but you have to care about each individual that you work with. You really, really do. It's not just another number. These are people. I was thinking about this last night because I knew we were going to do this podcast. And, as a coach, you can get wrapped up in the numbers, right? And just kind of want to check the box off of here's, this is what you're doing, go do it. These are people. I mean, us as competitors, judges will judge, competitors, and they should, based off the physique that day. But these are people that have insecurities, worries, doubts, fears, family life, home problems, financial issues, work issues. I mean, these are people, and you got to understand that, each individual is going through something at any given point of the time. So you really have to tap into that psychology, which I think has helped me as a coach, is something I always do. And I think it's really important, is to tap into that psychological aspect of the athlete. What makes that person tick? What makes them do what they do? Why do they want to be on the Olympia stage, or why do they want to win their pro card? What is the goal? What's end goal, and what makes them get up? What's their why, right? So these are things that you get into that psychological aspect as a coach, which I always make sure I do, even if the person is from another ethnicity and doesn't even speak English, which I've prepped so many of those guys. I will still find a way psychologically to tap into it and find what we need to pull out the absolute best to get where they've never been before, which is why another reason I've been able to have somewhat success with higher level athletes that maybe struggled in the past with maybe say conditioning, right?
There's a great book, man, if you haven't read it, on mentoring people. It's Coach K, the Duke coach for years. Yeah, I don't know if you've read it, but he has one on motivating people, and he has a thing in there where he talks about motivating, but he has a reputation of motivating everybody, and he said that there's really 3 types of people that he's encountered, and you can't coach all of them the same. And he said there's the guy that needs a push, you know, the kick in the ass. He said there's the guy that needs a hug and tell him everything's going to be okay. And then there's the guy that just needs the game plan, and you leave him alone, let him do his thing. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and
that's very true.
I've run businesses for years. I've been a CEO for the last decade or so, and that's sort of my approach with staff too. You can't mentor everybody the same, but you're right. It's just as much psychology as it is physiology at the end of the day.
100%. Absolutely.
And I've always heard that about you. That's one thing, like, why, you know, from being in the inner circle of the stuff and talking to people, you hear rumblings about other coaches that are deadbeats and some that are great, and everybody I've ever talked to that's worked with you, so that you've always been there for them and that you care about them and you give them your all. I've never heard a bad word mentioned about you.
So I appreciate that. I mean, I've definitely made my mistakes over the years as coach.
I mean, everybody does. We're humans.
Yeah, we all have, but I've definitely learned from them. You take accountability and you move on and you learn from it, you build from it, right? I just made a post about taking extreme ownership and accountability this morning, you know, kind of how athletes like to switch coaches it's pretty crazy what you'll see pros jump from 5 or 10 different coaches because they're looking for that magic bullet. And, you know, at the end of the day,
secret, everybody's chasing the secret.
What's the secret sauce, man? But it really comes down to the individual. So yeah, taking extreme ownership has been key for me. And, you know, just developing that mindset, like, you know, understanding, hey, these are people and I need to care for them. So just as much, like you said, the physiological standpoint of, you know, how do I manipulate the body? How do we manipulate the mind? Now, you can't always force people to have a killer instinct, and you can't necessarily teach a killer instinct, but you can bring it out of somebody if they've never experienced it before. You can get someone really comfortable with being uncomfortable, like you said. So that's what I try to do. And I intertwine it with everything. And, you know, I'm not a cheerleader, but I'm definitely there to, you know, take the thinking out of it, right? That's what a coach is supposed to do, because we know when we get to the end of a contest prep, there's a lot of things going on neurologically.
People lose their mind.
Yeah, with our neurotransmitters, because of a lot of things that we're utilizing that are, you know, causing those neurotransmitters to downregulate. And sleep obviously gets a lot worse the last 2 or 3 weeks. And there's a lot of things going on where we just literally cannot see what we're looking at. And people lose their minds, like you said. So that's where a good coach will come in and be like, listen, man, you know, and I have to tell guys, like, dude, stop thinking. That's why I'm here. So you literally need to almost not even look at your pictures and try to assess them. Just send them to me and let me do the thinking. Let me land the plane, so to speak. Just do the work, right? And that seems to work with a lot of guys, especially the overanalyzers and the people that will be too neurotic. They see a program and they're like, yeah, but, you know, I know this and I know my body, and, you know, they double think everything. And usually those guys are constantly in fight or flight. And those guys are usually the worst come the final week, because they think their body, like, and I think it was you talking about it maybe a week or 2 or a month ago, or an older podcast, where you guys were talking about your favorite foods backstage pumping up.
Yeah.
And, you know, people will be like, they'll eat something in like 20 or 30 minutes. The coach is like, dude, there it is. That's it. We did it. We nailed it. And it's like, man, if it wasn't there already, you're not going to do a whole lot, man. I mean, there's an acute response to blood pressure with sodium, obviously, for vasodilation, but outside of that, man, there ain't much going to happen besides maybe drinking some fluids.
No, eating the rice cakes with the honey and salt isn't going to do a whole lot backstage. A little bit maybe, but, you know, that's all psychological. It's like, you know, it's all the little, I don't know. It's like the football player wearing his favorite pair of socks on Sunday, right? Right. It's
Absolutely.
the lucky socks, man. It's just consistency. It's just a superstition and consistency. But yeah,
Yeah.
really the work is already done the day you show
Mhm.
up for the show.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
I
a
heard,
firm believer. I'm a firm believer in being pretty much ready 2 weeks out. I think by two
yeah,
weeks out, 14 days. I mean, let's just put it in days. 14 days, the body fat should be gone for the most part. I mean, the body fat should be gone. You should be waking up pretty close to like I could slap tan on and I'm dry enough. The body fat's gone. And then there you look at the small manipulations you can do at the end with maybe some water, some sodium, some glycogen,
yeah,
but nothing too over the top. Because if you try to get over the top, now there are cases we can get into that I've prepped some bodies that the last week the most wacky stuff happens, and you have to understand as a coach not to freak out because you understand what's going to happen over the course of 6 7 days. But the majority of people should be contest ready in my opinion, 2 weeks out, and then just again variables at the end.
yeah. I mean, you should definitely be. If you're still trying to lose fat going into peak week, you're in trouble. You're not
Yeah,
gonna.
and not only are you going to be in trouble with just your body's response, but I mean, think from a psychological standpoint. You're stressed every day. Am I going to make it? Am I going to be ready? You're not sleeping. You're in fight or flight constantly. What does that do? That shuts down rest and digest. So you're not
Right.
digesting the food properly. You're not going to the bathroom. Another problem people have the day before the show and the day of the show.
Yep.
And yes, it could be a fiber issue. It's a dehydration issue, but a lot of times it's also because they're in fight or flight
Yeah.
constantly. They're just not processing that food too. So, man, from a mental standpoint, from a body standpoint, yeah, 2 weeks out. If you're trying to lose fat, like you said, a week out, it's going to be a big problem.
Yeah. I think saw you post something about it that you said you're not going to like the results if that's where you're at.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, man. But I mean, I can take a couple of guys, for example. I mean, I used to prep Justin Rodriguez for many years. He's on the pro circuit, and he was one of those guys that a week out, most people would be like, "This dude's not going to be ready," and that's because he was a water bag. I mean, just one of those guys that I knew doing the things that we did at the end that were a complete 180 from whatever I would do with anybody else. He would drop 7 to 9 pounds, anywhere between 7 to 9 pounds of mainly water. And I would do things that just, again, on paper don't make sense. But we were able to figure out, because anytime I peak somebody, I always take notes. I have every note from every peak with the food we ate, the timing of the food, the bathroom usage, digestion,
That's a
what
good
they
idea.
ate, everything. I have notes, and they're all saved from years. I have years of notes. And I can look back and understand what we did and how we improved. And even though you can't fully go by the weight scale, it's just a small gauge. We have to also go by how you look. I still use it as a small gauge, because if you get on, let's say, you wake up on show day and you're a little flat, you have a meal of this, a little bit of fluid, you step on the scale, you're 2 pounds up. There's the look right there, right? That's the look. Okay, so apparently that weight correlates with the look, and we want to be able to maintain that as much as we can. And you'll see it, because there's guys that will do prejudging. They get off stage and they're fast metabolizers. Maybe they sweat a little bit on stage. They'll lose 4 to 5 pounds just from, if they do a
That's
lot of
me.
round. Yeah, if they do a lot of round. There's just guys that just, yeah, like you, just wacky metabolisms. Maybe you get a little, hypoglycemic backstage or on stage, and you just get back and you're like, what just happened? I mean, so there's a difference with maybe those guys where, again, but you can also use a scale, because then we need to get back up to that weight, whether it come in the form of fluid, glycogen, sodium, or all three together. But yeah, Justin would be one of those guys that a week out, he didn't necessarily look ready. And we still were able to bring his best looks in ever, where, I was doing things with him. And I have no problem I'm totally transparent. I mean, I would take sodium out for 48 hours. 48 hours, which I don't do with anybody, but sodium would go out with 48 hours. Potassium goes up, and I would use it in the form of a new salt.
Yeah, that's
So
what I've been using.
we'd bump his potassium levels up, not dangerously, because I don't carb people up on dates and potatoes and bananas, but potassium goes up a little bit. Sodium comes out. We would interject some other things like some aldactone for 3 days, because I usually don't, if I ever use aldactone, I don't like it more than 72 hours, because we know that it blocks the reuptake of, the aldosterone, sodium, essentially, because it blocks aldosterone. It's an androgen blocker. So you can actually start seeing people get softer on it. And then no matter what they eat, show day, burgers, fries, if you're blocking that, nothing's happening until you come out of that. So run a little bit of that, small amount of diazide as far as diuretics go. But it was that manipulation of sodium and then really dehydrating him, bringing the potassium up slightly. Dude, I'm telling you right now, the body, the changes, and I think I've posted it before. It's insane.
I've seen it.
When he looked his best, I think was 2022 Arnold, probably the biggest he's been. My favorite look was the 2020 Chicago Pro. I think that was the most shredded he'd ever been. We were doing these type of manipulations, and that goes against everything I talk about because I don't change much at the end, like sodium wise, maybe small manipulation, dehydration, obviously. And we know that when you're carbing up, you still need fluid to be able to drive that glycogen properly. And you need sodium also. So, I mean, those cofactors go in together. But for some reason, there are bodies out there that on paper, it just doesn't correlate the same that everybody else. And I know that a lot of people are going to probably push back and say, well, science is science. The human physiology is a human physiology. But I'm telling you, anecdotally, I'm speaking anecdotally from prepping so many people, there are bodies out there that just respond completely different. And you got to take notes and figure that out.
I mean, we know it. I mean, you can look at it. There's genetic outliers for everything. I mean, there's medicine is not exact. It's made to the mean when you look at it. So we know, I mean, an example, I mean, just a clear example where you can see genetic differentiation is basketball. You can look at it. I mean, being 7 feet tall, there's only like 2,500 people out of 8 billion that are 7 feet tall, and half of them are playing in the NBA or whatever it is. So, I mean, it's people that are at the high end of bodybuilding probably are genetic outliers, man. And the rules that apply, it would be like 5'6" and try to play basketball and with the same set of coaching that you would do if you were 7 feet tall. It's not going to work, man.
Absolutely.
That's 100%. What I tell you. And like you're talking about the scale too. So that's sort of my thought process on it. I do like to look at pictures and see how the pictures are looking. But if you see any rapid changes in the scale, I mean, you can do the math on it. It's not fat loss because you're not losing or gaining 3-4 pounds of fat in a day. That's just impossible. It's got to be a change in water, whether it's glycogen retention or subcutaneous water. And you can pair that up with the pictures and see where it is. So, I mean, that's kind of, I mean, I assume that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, total disclosure, right? So I just kind of made a little fun of coaches where they'll feed somebody sugar and be like, there it is. But what I do with guys, and this is everybody, amateurs all the way to the Olympia. I even had guys where, I wasn't able to go backstage to the Olympia and they're texting me and I'm like, listen, go to the bathroom, take a pee, get on. They have their scale with them. This is an hour before the stage. Get on your scale and send me the weight, right? And if it got below what I believe was the peak weight, here, take in 6 ounces of fluid right now, take in a little bit of sodium. Let's wait 20, 30 minutes, get your legs back up. Let's take some pictures. Let's see what happened. Get back on the scale until we get back to that point. Exactly, because they do correlate together. I don't want people to get too scale obsessed, but when you're talking about at the very end, just like you said, if you're dropping fast, it's not fat. So it's gonna be a fluid loss. And typically it's coming from the muscle at that point, because you're already dehydrated to an extent, and you probably use some sort of pharmacological diuretic, whether it be, hopefully just something like diazide or aldactone if you're using that smart, or, some guys don't need it at all, but still, if you've dehydrated it down to an extent, it's coming from the muscle. So therefore it's got to be replenished somehow in some way. And we know that water can hit somebody really fast. Sodium and water really can hit fast, where it can make substantial changes pretty quickly, man.
Yeah, I've always usually I don't even use a diuretic. I generally don't need one. Last year, I just ran a little bit of diazide.
Yep.
going on the night before the show, and it was plenty. Drive me out plenty.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
some, like you said, some people are water bags, man.
Mhm.
I've seen it. It's got to be some differentiation in aldosterone regulation, I would assume. You know,
That's what I've always thought over the years. It had to be something with aldosterone, and I honestly get, like, when I run labs with clients, I'll get their those levels checked on their lab work, their aldosterone levels. Like when I was prepping Hassan in 2022 and we won 2 pro shows, he was getting labs every 2 weeks. I had to figure out what had been missing over those years where someone couldn't, because the dude works hard. I mean, he's got a crazy work ethic. I mean, he'll do 3 hours of cardio. He'll eat next to nothing if he has to. So there was something going on and it correlated into that. And, we were able to pinpoint it, figure it out, and fix it and dial that in. And he was another guy that, substantial water loss the last week. And I usually, man, it's a lot of these really big guys. So I don't know if it has something to do with a myostatin gene or just the size, IGF-1, or, that correlates with aldosterone. I mean, there's a lot going on from a cascading effect that I don't necessarily claim that I even know. Again, I've just seen anecdotally the type of bodies that usually require that.
well, bigger guys are harder to peak. I mean, it's just more tissue, and at the end of the day, I mean, you can see it like with the big guys. I mean, you can carb a large dude up on 1,500. It was a Dennis Wolf. I think I heard
5,000 grams of carbs.
Yeah, it was something insane, man, and he wouldn't spill over on that.
2007 when he just came out and just wrecked almost everybody.
But I mean, he's a tall
5,000 grams of carbs, dude. Yeah. And what are we on paper, right? From a scientific medical standpoint, they will tell you that the body can only store so much glycogen, even at a specific body weight, right? But again, bodybuilding is outside the box a lot. And I remember, I think I heard this 13 years ago or more, Jose Raymond said, bodybuilding almost doesn't make sense. Sometimes the less you do, the better results you get.
Yeah.
So you got to think out, in terms of that sometimes.
I mean, that would make sense. It's less, less variables, less room for error. That's why I get like really hesitant when I see these super complex peaking protocols that I've seen some coaches put together. I think some people just do it to make themselves seem smarter than what they are. And they have no idea what they're talking about. I think they're just making shit up half the time, but it's, but with big guys, I mean, it's more real estate to manage at the end of the day. I mean, who knows how much a glycogen a guy like his size can store? I mean, clearly, if he didn't spill over, that got stored.
Yeah. It had to be. Yeah. I mean, there's no other way. It got stored. So, and we know that the energy output is extremely low the last couple of days as far as like doing, training or cardio. And of course, back in 2007, nobody was doing steps. I mean, that was not even, no one even talked about doing steps, right? So, I mean, you have to think about it, man. Like, that is a super physiological response to carbohydrates, storing glycogen, that is just off the textbooks, off the charts, that just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but it worked. And you got to have an eye as a coach to actually be able to look at someone and see exactly what's going on and almost know by default how to make calls on the fly. So when the body changes without overanalyzation, like you said, because there's so many people that make it super complex. And I hear these really big words and verbiage and terms to sound like you're coming from a medical field. And it really doesn't always have to be that complicated. It really doesn't.
I mean, it is a complex thing, but you need to distill it down into the simplest way possible.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, make it no more complex than it needs to be, and no simpler than it needs to be. It's really. I've often wondered too, like with the glycogen storage, I've noticed this is just something, once again, I have no evidence, but there seems to be a genetic component to it. It seems to be the guys that are of German heritage are the dudes that I'm not shitting you. I'm German background, and Dennis Wolf, I have, we talk to Roman all the time, and Roman can just eat an ungodly amount of
Good
carbs,
point.
man.
It's a good point.
I've noticed it's the big German dudes that seem to be able to, I don't know if that's, just probably.
No. I think ethnicity definitely could play a role. I mean, that's a cool anecdote that you're talking about, because what I've noticed too when it comes to, and I can say this because my wife is Cuban, she's Spanish, so a lot of the Cuban bodybuilders that I've worked with, they don't have a very high response to being able to load glycogen without spilling over. Almost every single person across the board is more typically, now, maybe not everybody, but people that I've worked with over a long period of time, they cannot store a whole lot of glycogen without spilling. So I think you may be onto something. I think ethnicity definitely will have a genetic disposition as far as
Well,
what
there's
you
genetic
can
components to it. I know this is
Yeah,
going to be really politically incorrect, but you can see it, like with a lot of African American guys, you can just diet the hell out of them and they don't get flat.
100%, 100%. I mean,
Like,
a great example is Sean Roden. Sean Roden, I remember Aceto talking about him dieting on 40 grams of carbs for like 10 weeks.
they just look better and better and better and better.
It's unbelievable. I mean, you would think that this guy would be, I mean, come on, 40 grams of carbs would make what would that do to you in one day? You'd
I
be
would look
flat as
like
a
a
board,
forced
right?
labor camp victim. I look like I
Yeah.
just escaped
So
the
you're
gulag.
out. You are 100% right, and also like somebody like Hassan that I trained, I've never seen someone eat so low of carbohydrates and not lose muscle and protein for that matter too. Just the ability to be able to hold on to tissue was unlike anything I've ever seen. So yeah, dude, there's definitely something there. And again, these are all very important tools as a coach to keep in your toolbox to understand. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it variable wise, but it's important to know these things. And it's a good point, because I've always wondered about Roman. I mean, just hearing how much this guy eats is just insane. I mean, it just, again, off the charts. So yeah, I've never thought about the German thing went hand in hand, but yeah, I think you're right, because I can't think of one German that has not been able to eat an ungodly amount of food.
Yeah, it seems like I mean, it's just an observation. I mean, you'll see it, and it's like most of your highly successful strongmen, they're all Norwegian, they're all British, that those guys that have all the Scandinavian DNA, they're just built for lifting heavy shit.
Yes.
As far as, just your general approach to prep, I know you said you have people ready 2 weeks out. I mean, what is your general framework for getting people shredded?
Yeah. So, I mean, really, I'm a huge proponent in carb cycling. That's why, every time you post something about carb cycling, I'm like, there it is, 100%. Really,
Yep.
At the end of the day, it's calorie cycling, because we're
It's
manipulating
calorie cycling.
yeah, we're manipulating all macronutrients. It's something Jay taught me when I was 16, called it the zigzag diet. So,
Yeah.
It's just calorie cycling. So I pretty much right off the bat start with that. I mean, depending on the structure of their training, their split, how did we set off their progression season? If they just came to me, after their progression season, I didn't have a hold on it. It's just prep, which I don't like that. I like to kind of have somewhat control throughout the entire year of every variable so that we can build up what we need to build up going into prep, because we essentially prep for the prep, right? The progression off season is a prep for the prep. It's prep year round, like you said. So I structure it into a carb calorie cycling right off the bat, and then just manipulate cardio as needed. Now, what I do with the majority of my clients that compete, pretty much everybody, is I'm a stickler for communication. So I get into the point where even when they're 10, 12 weeks out, we're talking every 2 to 3 days where I can make changes. I never just say, here's a week, check back in a week. And this is what keeps me so busy. And this is why I kind of have to pull back on volume, because I've been doing this for over a decade, where, I mean, I'm talking to so many people starting at 4 a.m. all the way up to 9 p.m., depending on where they are in the world. And we're making changes based off the way they're looking, what their body weight's doing, what's their biofeedback in the gym, what's their sleep looking like, constantly pulling labs throughout the prep if they have that accessibility or the finances, depending on what we're trying to achieve. And then just, basically it's like an onion, right? I'm peeling back the layers of the onion throughout the prep, where I yes, I want you to be ready 2 weeks out, but I also would like you to be ahead the whole time. I am very comfortable with someone being ahead of schedule the entire prep. It makes it much easier to focus on training and posing and sleeping and then just enough cardio. And that's not the case with everybody, but it's my preferred way if someone really did their homework to set everybody up properly, and we peel back the layers nice and slow. We preserve as much tissue as possible. In some cases, some guys even gain tissue. And we know this because they're getting constantly tested throughout the course of the prep, whether it be a dunk tank, getting, at a university to test the body fat, the muscle tissue, DEXA scan, even though they're not 100% accurate. I have seen it happen where people actually grow. And obviously that's a correlation to PEDs and their response to PEDs as well. But they are growing into the show. But man, I just really try to manipulate based off what the body does. I don't have a structure where it's like, okay, we're going to run 3 lows, 1 high, 2 baselines. We'll come back to that. Like, if someone is checking in with me on a daily basis, which I do get to the last 5 weeks, 4 weeks, and I just see, something like we just ran a high day, right? And they check back in. And obviously we know carbohydrates can increase and induce diuresis, more urination. So it could be just a water loss, or their metabolic rate is just picking up. You're just running through it. Just like you were, usually at the end of your prep, lower body fat levels, insulin sensitivity is higher. You're on specific PEDs. You're just burning through glycogen. We could run 2 or 3 high days in a row. We could run what I call supersaturation days, which is an extremely high day on top of that with some free foods, right? Specific foods that digest well, that don't cause systemic inflammation. People would call it a cheat meal. I don't really call it that. I call it more supersaturation mixed with a high day. So it's just really an overfeeding, which we do over the course of 2 to 3 days. So it's almost like a diet break, the terminology they like to use now. It's an overfeeding and then pushing. So I always tell people, you got to know when to push the gas pedal and pump the brakes. It's a constant balance of structuring to hold muscle tissue, preserve it, and be able to push, and pull down so we can burn fat and lose fat. Like you said, there's a difference between burning fat and losing fat. We're losing fat consistently, and we're holding on and preserving as much tissue consistently. And as long as those are going hand in hand, and then their biofeedback is good, their digestion, we're not getting side effects, no GERD, acid reflux, bloating, sleep is good, then, we're able to control all those variables, because we know that proper sleep is going to induce a lot of physiological things that we want to promote fat loss and preserve muscle and increase insulin sensitivity and all those things.
What is a warning sign you look for when you need to pull back and give people a refeed?
Usually, I can't say gym performance, because it depends on the person from a psychological standpoint. If someone goes in the gym and they feel sorry for themselves, they're already going in defeated. They're not going to have a good session. So it may not even be that. Now, we know neurologically things happen when you eat a lot of carbohydrates, dopamine increases, all the neurotransmitters, you feel better. But there's different mindsets, right? So typically what I will look for before the refeed will come is it could be either or. It could be a stagnation in body weight. And it's like, man, I've been pushing this diet hard on this individual. It's time to feed them, because we can't go any lower. We can't do any more. So instead of just digging them into a hole, we're going to do the opposite and actually feed the metabolism more. And it actually brings it back to life. And typically that's 3 to 4 days. What I've seen anecdotally, 4 days is usually the max of really, really pushing somebody. Again, not everybody, but this is just general population, the average person. So obviously a look, right? A specific look where they actually look softer. So they're so flat that they don't look as hard, right? So it's almost like, man, this person either accrued some body fat overnight, which we know didn't happen, or they're retaining a ton of fluid, which typically doesn't happen. So they're so flat that the muscle's just not pushing against the skin. Therefore, it's time to pull the trigger and fill this body back up, refeed it, utilize that performance in the gym the next day. Because at that point, you're not going to feel the carbs that day. It's just not going to happen. Almost everybody on a high day they don't feel that food until the very next day, because glycogen, the onset time of glycogen can take some time to really get in there when you are at low levels of body fat.
Yeah.
So yeah, typically, or sleep really goes down the drain. So there's a correlation of different biofeedbacks, but typically an over flat body and usually gym performance. Not always the case for everybody, like I said, but it's on average is from what I've seen.
I remember when I was absolutely buried on that prep a few years ago, I went into the gym one day and I usually warm up with 4 plates on the leg press and then work my way up. I couldn't even move the 4 plates.
Yeah. It's a perfect example.
And I'm like, well, I know I'm in trouble.
Yep. Perfect example right there.
I was in a bad spot. Yeah, that flat, soft look, you'll see it now and then. I wonder sometimes if it's just cortisol being high from pushing too hard, and a combination of things. So that's
100%.
kind of what I speculate.
Oh yeah, and that's another thing too, real quick, before, not to get off too much of a tangent, but yes, cortisol being too high will do that. And sometimes if I'll pull cardio out for 3 days in a row, just as an example. So obviously they're getting a little more rest. They're training. They're still training, obviously. The cardio's gone and they're getting more sleep. Just that in and of itself with the cortisol reduction, night and day difference to a body. Night and day difference.
I noticed too with pushing the stimulants and fat burners too hard too, that sometimes can cause problems. I've had people where I'll just tell them, take 2 days off from the stimulants and pull them back and then get some sleep. And then you'll see improvements sometimes too.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's where I'll usually interject like phosphatidylserine and amodin, things that will reduce cortisol, ashwagandha, rhodiola rosea, relora, L-theanine. These are all things, obviously, you would take closer to sleep. And that reduction in cortisol, and just like you said, coming down on the stimulants, and if you're on any thyroid or anything like that too, even taking a couple days break from that will make a huge difference. So I mean, these are all things that people have. If people are listening to us talk right now organically, that this is how you coach people. I mean, this is how you coach. You can't just do it because everybody else is doing it. Everybody's response is individualistic, and that's exactly how you coach.
I'll get guys that want me to map out their diet and cycle for the whole 16 weeks. And I'm like, dude, I can give you a framework, but I can't say where we're going to be at. We just have to see how your body reacts and adjust accordingly. But I mean, we all have a sort of framework we work from, but or you just take a bunch of trim, that works too.
Yeah, man, just do it. Load it up. 2 grams a week, man. Why not?
Fuck it, right? If you want to die young, go for it.
Don't do it, kid.
Don't do it, kid. I hate to cut short, man. I did want to talk to you about, maybe we can do another one, but dig into a little bit of cycles and stuff for contest prep and off season. But I'm running short on time, so maybe we can do a part 2 at some point and talk about the approach to that stuff. I think people always think there's some secret formula, man, and there really isn't. It's just basic stuff. No, at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's nothing that, I always heard there's no secret foods or anabolics being grown in Weeder labs in California. It's pretty much everybo's doing the same stuff now.
What's funny with the anabolics? Yeah, it's like it's always the gym bros that are running all the weird off the wall shit and doing the weird cycles. And then like I talk to guys that are on the pro level all the time, and it's like off season test, EQ, or primo and GH, maybe a little bit of insulin, and that's it.
Dude, I mean, I'll leave it at this because I don't want to cut your time. I know you got another one coming up, but like I've talked to guys, amateurs that, I mean, not to sound, they didn't look great. And these guys are running exotics like Cytodren and Lasix into the last day or two. And I'm just like, what? Like, you missed the whole point of everything. Like, you are thinking like this is going, again, the magic bullet, right? This is it. This is what they're doing in Kuwait, right? They're hooking me up to an IV, and it's like, oh my gosh, guys, listen, burn the body fat, preserve the muscle tissue, work year round, do your homework, show up on show day, ready, in shape, make it happen. I mean, this is crazy that people are getting into this nonsense. So, I mean, it's wild stuff, man.
Well, let's do another one at some point, man, and we can fill people in on this stuff.
Yeah,
AJ,
let's do it, man.
What I know you have a supplement line and you got going now. What stuff are you want to promote, man? What do you want to tell us about?
Yeah, so cementfactory.com, you can find out. I have some of it back there. Oh, back there.
I still need to pick up your gut revival. I
I'll
need to
send
do
it
that.
out to you, brother. I'll send it out to you as a fellow irritable bowel disease brother. I know exactly what you're going through
Sucks,
and how
man.
it feels. It's up and down day to day, man. And prep can definitely run some havoc on it. You can put a little bit of hot sauce on some chicken and be an hour later, you're like, dude, I just made a huge, or even while you're eating it, you know you're going to pay for it.
People laugh at me and my plain ass chicken and rice, man. It's like the only fucking thing I can eat.
The way it works, man, and you're not in pain. So I hear you, man. But yeah, we listen. I don't want to keep you. I appreciate that. We'll definitely talk about the supplement line. We'll get into more prep, anabolics, layouts, final week, peaking, whatever the case may be. Man, I love talking about this stuff. I know I haven't been around publicly, so Paul was
You
able
need to
to.
be out there, man. I've been
Yeah,
nagging
Paul
you
was
for
able
a
to
while,
drag me in
man.
and get me.
I've been nagging him. I've been chasing him down, folks. So it took a while to pin
He's
him
been
down.
doing a great job, man. Paul, keep up the great work, brother. You're doing an amazing job with just
Thank
the
you.
information you're putting out with these great guests, man. So I'm just honored to be on here. Thank you for having me. Hopefully this was educational. We'll get more going, a lot more. If anybody has any further questions, leave them in the comment section. And next time, maybe we can address them and we can go from there, man.
Yeah, and I'll put your contact information in the description below. So if
Perfect.
you get that over to
Thank you,
me, I'll
brother.
do that. Thank you for watching, folks.
Thank you.